Hey everyone, welcome back. We're diving deep today into something most of us probably never even think about,
Yeah,
grammatical gender.
it's pretty fascinating stuff.
It is. I mean, we're going to be looking at how languages categorize nouns in all sorts of ways. And I got to say,
Uh-huh.
some of it is really surprising. Like, did you know that some languages group their nouns as masculine or feminine?
Right. Or even neuter.
Yeah. And that gets me thinking, does
Mm,
that change how people see the world?
that's a great question.
And then what happens when you try to translate something from a language that has those categories into one that doesn't, like English?
Yeah, translating between those kinds of languages can be a real challenge for sure.
I bet. There's so much to unpack here. I'm really excited to dig into this with you all.
Me too.
So let's start with the basics. What exactly is grammatical gender?
Okay, so grammatical gender, it's not about like biological sex or anything like that.
Okay.
It's really more about categorizing nouns in a language. It's a system, kind of like a big organizational scheme for all the nouns.
I see.
You've got languages like Spanish and French where they mostly have masculine and feminine categories.
Right.
But then you've got German, which throws in a neuter category as well.
And then there's English, which is just kind of doing its own thing.
Exactly. English is interesting because it doesn't have a grammatical gender system like that for its nouns.
Yeah, we just use the for pretty much everything.
Exactly. But in a lot of other languages, the gender of a noun can actually change the articles you use, like,
Oh.
but also the adjectives, even the verbs sometimes all have to match the gender of that noun.
That's wild.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, does speaking a language with grammatical gender, does that actually affect how people think about the world around them?
That's a really interesting question, and research suggests that it actually might. Yeah. They've done studies where, for instance, they asked people to describe different objects, and what they found is that speakers of gendered languages sometimes describe things differently depending on the grammatical gender that's assigned to those objects in their language.
So they're not just using different words, their whole perception of the object is different.
It seems that way. For example, there was this one study where they asked Spanish and German speakers to describe bridges.
Okay.
Now, in Spanish, the word for bridge is grammatically feminine, right? And so what they found was that the Spanish speakers often used words like slender, graceful, even feminine when they were describing bridges.
Interesting.
But get this, in German, the word for bridge is grammatically masculine.
Okay.
And so the German speakers tended to use words like imposing, robust, masculine to describe the same bridges.
Wow. That is fascinating. But I mean, couldn't that also be due to cultural differences, between those countries?
Oh, absolutely. Culture definitely plays a huge role, and it's really a complex interplay of language, culture, individual experiences, all of that.
Yeah.
But still, the research on how grammatical gender might influence perception is super intriguing.
It really is. And it's not just descriptions either, right? Like you're saying, there's even evidence that it can affect memory.
Exactly. There's this study where they showed that people were better at remembering an object if its grammatical gender matched the gender of the person who supposedly owned it.
No way. That's crazy.
It is, right.
It is. So this all makes me wonder, how on earth do you translate between languages with and without grammatical gender?
Right.
Like if one language is explicitly marking gender on all its nouns and the other isn't, how do you even capture those subtle meanings?
Yeah, that's a constant challenge for translators. You have to really understand the nuances embedded in the grammatical gender of one language to find a way to convey that same meaning in another language that doesn't have that same system.
Can you give us an example?
Sure. Take the Spanish phrase, echar de menos. Now, literally, that translates to throw less.
To throw less.
Yeah, but idiomatically, it means to miss someone or something.
Oh, okay.
And the verb echar, it actually takes on a feminine form in that phrase. It's because of the implied object, falta,
Which means?
lack. It's like saying to throw less of a lack, basically.
Yeah.
And falta is grammatically feminine in Spanish. So you need to understand that nuance of the grammatical gender to translate that phrase correctly into English.
That makes sense. So we've talked about how grammatical gender might affect how adults think and perceive things. But what about kids? How do children learn these complex grammatical gender systems?
Well, kids' brains are amazing, right?
Yeah.
They start picking up on these patterns super early, often even before they can read or write.
Really?
Yeah. And, they might make some funny mistakes at first.
I bet.
Like if moon is grammatically masculine in their language, they might call the moon he, even though you've explained that it's not a person.
Oh, that's cute.
It is. But eventually, They figure it all out, and they end up using the system really accurately.
That's incredible. It's like they're cracking a secret code or something.
Right.
So what's actually happening in their brains when they're learning all of this?
Well, neuroscience is starting to give us some clues about that.
Okay.
We know that different areas of the brain are involved in processing grammatical gender.
Like,
Well, the areas responsible for language comprehension, obviously,
makes sense.
but also areas involved in memory, even visual imagery.
Oh. So we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about how grammatical gender is kind of this hidden layer of meaning in language,
Yeah.
how it might actually influence our thoughts, our perceptions, even our memories, and the crazy challenges it poses for translation and for kids learning language.
Definitely.
What's the big takeaway here?
You know, for me, it really highlights how powerful language is. It shapes how we see the world, how we think, even how we remember things in ways we may not even realize.
It's true. It really makes you think twice about the words you choose and the assumptions that might be baked into the language we speak.
Absolutely.
So, to wrap things up, here's a question for everyone listening.
Okay.
If you could create your own grammatical gender system, what categories would you choose and why? Would you stick with the traditional masculine, feminine, and neuter? Or would you come up with something completely different? Imagine how your system might reflect our understanding of the world, or even change it. It's been awesome exploring this with you all.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Bye.
See you next time.